Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We have with us Ambassador T.S. Tirumurti, the permanent representative of India, in his capacity as the President of the Security Council for this month, and he will brief you about the program for the month. We will be conducting the briefing today like this. Ambassador Tirumurti will give a brief overview of the program, after which we will open up the floor for questions. We will first take questions from those who are present in person, and then we will move on to those who are joining us virtually. I would request those of you who would ask questions to please state your name and organization, and as far as practicable, please restrict your question to one per person in the interest of time. With that, and without further ado, I'll give the floor to the ambassador.
Good afternoon, friends. I'm very happy to meet all of you here to brief you on our presidency of the Security Council this month. At the outset, I would like to extend my sincere felicitations to Ambassador Nicolas de Rivière, permanent representative of France to the UN, for steering the Security Council as president for the month of July. I would also like to extend my appreciation to Ambassador Nicolas and his entire team for guiding the Council during a very busy and challenging month. Allow me to mention that it is both an honor and privilege for India to preside over the Security Council in August. The month of August is of particular significance to us, given the fact that India will be celebrating our 75th Independence Day on the 15th of August, later this month. This, as you know, is our 8th tenure in the Security Council. India has chaired the Security Council last in November 2012. You would have seen the program of work. Let me start with the signature events that we plan to have during our presidency. There are three major areas which we will focus on in August: maritime security, peacekeeping, and counter-terrorism. While maritime security has been discussed in the Security Council in the past, and a few resolutions have been adopted on select aspects of maritime security and crime, we feel that it is time that the various dimensions of maritime security and crime are discussed in a holistic manner and addressed through international cooperation. Issues such as piracy, use of sea to conduct crimes, illicit trafficking in narcotic and psychotropic substances, trafficking in persons and illicit firearms, and illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, IIUs, have implications for the livelihood and security of coastal communities, international trade, energy security, and the global economy. Safeguarding the legitimate uses of the oceans and the lives of the people at sea, it requires a comprehensive approach that ensures our common prosperity and security while countering the threat of hostile or illegal acts within the maritime domain. Much of India's history has been shaped by the oceans, and maritime security has always received a very high priority in India's foreign policy. In 2015, the Prime Minister of India put forward the initiative of SAGAR, an acronym for Security and Growth for All in the region, that encourages states to conserve and sustainably use the oceans and to make meaningful efforts to create a safe, secure, and stable maritime domain. We plan to hold a virtual high-level open debate on maritime security on the 9th of August. This will be chaired by the Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi. I am also happy to inform you that His Excellency, the President of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, who is also the President of the African Union, has kindly agreed to participate in the open debate, given the importance that the topic of maritime security has for Africa. The open debate, among others, will seek answers from member states to questions such as what could be done to address the drivers of maritime crime and insecurity. How could member states enhance their capabilities and improve operational coordination to access maritime security-related threats? And how to advance the implementation through international cooperation. Our objective through this high-level debate is to make a case for equal access for all nations to the use of global commons so that sea lanes are rendered as pathways to mutual prosperity and corridors of peace. The second signature event relates to peacekeeping. This is an issue which is very close to our hearts. India is proud of its long and rich tradition of contribution to UN peacekeeping operations, including the involvement of women peacekeepers. We have contributed more than 250,000 troops in nearly 50 missions over the years, and cumulatively the largest from any country. India always remembers the valor and bravery of the 4,089 peacekeepers, including 175 from India, who have laid down their lives across various missions for the cause of peace. At the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic, in response to the request of the Secretary General, we upgraded 2 of our peacekeeping hospitals, one in Juba, South Sudan, and the other in Goma, Democratic Republic of Congo. We have also gifted vaccine doses to cover peacekeepers across all the UN peacekeeping missions. We have also pledged air support to MINUSMA and are working now with the UN Secretariat to deploy them at the earliest. Considering the fact that peacekeepers continue to function in volatile and complex situations to implement the Security Council mandates, we will be strongly advocating for enhanced measures to ensure the safety and security of the protectors of peace. Our August presidency, we will focus on 2 specific aspects pertaining to peacekeeping. One is how to ensure the safety of peacekeepers by use of technology. And 2, how to bring to justice the perpetrators of crimes against peacekeepers. We believe that infusion of appropriate technology can play a significant role in improving the safety and security of the peacekeepers. Use of field focus, reliable and cost-effective new technologies in peacekeeping operations that are driven by practical needs of end users on the ground is the need of the hour. Under the overarching theme of protecting the protectors, the External Affairs Minister of India will be chairing an open debate on the 18th of August on the topic of technology and peacekeeping. It will be held in the Security Council chambers. The third high-level event which we will host is on counter-terrorism, which is of course a national priority for us. We are firmly against terrorism in all its forms and manifestations and believe that there could be no justification whatsoever for terrorism. We will continue to keep the spotlight on this matter as we have in the past, both inside the Council and outside as well. We have not only strengthened the efforts to combat terrorism, especially, for example, in financing of terrorism, we have also prevented efforts to dilute the focus on terrorism. The External Affairs Minister of India will be chairing a briefing on the 19th of August to discuss the Secretary General's report on ISIL Daesh. There are also several mandated meetings scheduled for the month. You have the program of work before you. These meetings are Syria, chemical weapons, Syria, political and humanitarian, UNIFIL, which is the UN interim force in Lebanon, Somalia, Yemen, Iraq, and the Middle East, the Israel-Palestine issue, and these are monthly meetings. You're also aware that this morning we adopted a PRST on the drawdown of UNAMID. We have also scheduled during the month the adoption of mandate renewals on UNIFIL, which is Lebanon, UNSOM, Somalia, and Mali sanctions. There may be another resolution increasing the ceiling of MINUSMA. We have also kept adequate gaps in the schedule so as to allow for contingencies that may arise during the course of the month and where the Council could be called upon to play its role. With this, I thank you very much, and I'll open the floor for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We will go to the questions now. I will ask you to raise your hands, and I'll call everyone one after another. Again, I request you to please state your name and your organization before posing a question. Thank you. Yes, please.
On behalf of the UN Correspondent Association, thank you for this briefing, Mr. Ambassador, and best of luck this month. And we hope to see you as much as you can at the stakeout after the meetings. My name is Nabil Abisab, and I am Al Arabi TV station correspondent. Afghanistan, of course, Afghanistan is, I'm sure, a great concern for India. What do you think the Security Council can do to maybe prevent further escalation in Afghanistan in the near future? Thank you.
No, I think thank you very much for your question. The situation in Afghanistan is of deep concern to all members of the Security Council. And we have seen that in recent dates, the violence is only increasing. And the UN report, in fact, goes on to say that the number of casualties during the period of May to June is, in fact, exceeds the number between January and April. And targeted killings are increasing. Women, girls, and minorities are being systematically targeted. And you also know, all of you know, that there was an attack on the UN compound, the UNAMA compound, recently in Herat. So I think, in fact, I expect that probably the Security Council will be looking at this aspect sooner rather than later on Afghanistan. And as far as India is concerned, I think we have mentioned very clearly that we want to see an independent, peaceful, democratic, and a stable Afghanistan. And India has supported at every opportunity, that can bring peace, security, and stability in Afghanistan. And we are convinced that there should be we should address the question of violence and the targeted attacks. And these are of very serious concern, and all violence must come to an end. And ties with international terrorism should also be cut. And we cannot have terrorist camps once again moving back into Afghanistan. And this will have a direct impact on India. So a lasting political settlement through an inclusive Afghan-led and an Afghan-owned and an Afghan-controlled process, I think it's extremely important, because I think it's important for us to protect the gains which we have had in the last nearly 20 years. And it's extremely important, once again, that they are respectful to the aspirations of the Afghan women, the youth, and the minorities. They need a safe and a democratic future. I think this is where I think we believe that any government that comes to power in Afghanistan has to be seen as legitimate in the eyes of the people. So consequently, we cannot have unilateral imposition of will by any party, and peaceful negotiations should be taken seriously by all the parties. And the dialogue which they are having, there is a need for that to be accelerated. And I think these are concerns which are common to all the members of the Security Council. And we have supported a leading role for the UN, since it will definitely help in a lasting and a durable outcome to the discussions which are going on. And the durable peace is important because it has direct implication. The security and stability of Afghanistan has a direct implication on the region itself. And durable peace, it requires a genuine double peace, which is a peace within Afghanistan and peace around Afghanistan. So I'm hoping that whenever we start looking at this in the Security Council, which I expect sooner rather than later, that we will look into all these aspects and see how best to support the peace talks which are going on.
Thank you, sir. I will go forward.
Thank you so much. My name is Abdul Hamid Sayam from the Arabic daily Al-Quds Al-Arabi based in London. Mr. Ambassador, I want to ask you both as a President of the Security Council and as the representative of India. India was ambitious for a possibility to become a permanent member of the Security Council. And that includes one of the preconditions to uphold international law. And the issue of Kashmir, there have been a number of Security Council resolutions that allows the Kashmiri people to exercise self-determination through a referendum. The provocative action of India in 2019 to cancel the special status of Kashmir raised many questions. I want to ask you to give us some ideas how this issue can be solved. And I want to tie it with the issue of Palestine. India is a great friend of the Palestinians throughout history. Now you have very special relation with the Israeli government also. Have you used your leverage and your friendship with Israel also to advance the right of the Palestinian for self-determination and statehood and independence? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. See, I think right at the outset, I do want to make something very clear, that Jammu and Kashmir is an integral and inalienable part of India. I think it's important to recognize that. And the issues relating to the union territory of Jammu and Kashmir are internal affairs of India. And in fact, even the members of the Security Council, when this was brought up, I think almost all of them agreed that this issue was not for the Council to discuss. And I would just like to underline, because you had mentioned about Security Council resolutions, and you will recall that the last agreement which India and Pakistan had goes back to 1972. It is called the Simla Agreement. And this agreement, in fact, has been mentioned by the Secretary General himself. So this resolution, the 1972 agreement, provides that the resolution of differences between the parties should be resolved by peaceful means and by bilateral negotiations. So I think since Pakistan has signed off on this, you will only hope that they will follow through on this and implement the provisions of the Simla Agreement. And you have also mentioned about the constitutional changes which has been brought about in Jammu and Kashmir. And these constitutional changes, if you recall, relates to the temporary provisions on Jammu and Kashmir, including in Article 370 of our Constitution. Let me mention to you that the changes have been brought through established parliamentary procedures. And it is well within the framework of the Constitution of India to effect these changes. So any change or modification to Article 370, like any other provision of the Constitution, is the sole prerogative of the Parliament of the Republic of India. So I just wanted to put this forward so that you're very clear on where we stand, both on the issue of Jammu and Kashmir and the constitutional changes which we have brought forward. On the question of Palestine, let me just say that India's position on the question of Palestine has been quite unambiguous. And, I just wanted to say that you have mentioned quite rightly that we have been consistent in our long-standing support for the Palestinian cause and for the establishment of a sovereign, viable, and an independent state of Palestine living side by side in peace and security with Israel. And we have believed firmly in that only the two-state solution will deliver enduring peace for all Palestinians and Israelis. And this should be achieved through direct negotiations between both sides on all the final status issues. And we have always stood ready to support all the efforts by our regional and the international partners to restart this negotiation and the Middle East peace process. Because we are convinced that all of us need a just, peaceful, and a lasting solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And so therefore, I think when it comes to this, we have been in touch with both the parties, and we are looking at a long-term ceasefire. You know, the May 21 ceasefire was brought in due to concerted efforts of the international community, and we are looking at a long-term ceasefire. And at this point, I think the Security Council's focus has been on the humanitarian aid, which they feel should be going to Gaza through the Palestinian Authority. So we want to work with the Palestinian Authority on this. And India has also contributed to capacity building in Palestine. In fact, we have pledged more than $70 million, and this is not only for capacity building, but we have also taken projects which are extremely important for the Palestinians. So I just wanted to put this entire issue in perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I would again request everyone, as far as practicable, to limit to one question each. I will give the floor to Eddie first, followed by.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Edith Lederer from the Associated Press. I have one question, but as a follow-up to your three major meetings this month, can we expect any outcome documents either on maritime security, on terrorism, on peacekeeping? And then I'll ask my question.
Yes, at this point, we are discussing with the other delegations on this, because an outcome document, as you know, is something which depends on all the others. It involves all 15 of us to agree. So we are looking at outcome documents, and let's see whether we can get there.
Okay, my question is a related question on Afghanistan. A large number of women's rights supporters and faith leaders have called on the UN Security Council to authorize a peacekeeping force for Afghanistan under the Women, Peace and Security Resolution. Is this an idea that India supports and that you think could ever have any legs, so to speak, in the Security Council? Thank you.
At this point of time, I think we are looking at how the talks shape up. And at this point of time, we are hoping that the talks, the peace talks, will yield results. And we are also hoping that there will be no military solution, and people are not going to have a military solution to this. And as I mentioned, I think it's extremely important for us to have legitimacy to anyone who comes in power. And so we don't want a unilateral imposition of will by any particular party on Afghanistan. So that is where the focus has been right now. I don't think we have quite come to the idea of a peacekeeping force in Afghanistan.
Thank you. I'll give the floor to Yoshita.
Thank you, Ambassador, and best wishes for the August presidency of India. As you mentioned, one of the key focus will be counter-terrorism. Now, India has been a victim of cross-border terrorism from Pakistan for several decades now. And with India hosting this signature event on counter-terrorism in the context of the Secretary General's report on ISIL and Daesh, do you think this report should also cover banned terror outfits like Pakistan-based Jaish-e-Mohammed and Lashkar-e-Taiba to send a strong signal against these countries that provide safe havens to terrorism and financing, and also to strengthen the international global fight against terrorism? Thank you.
No, I thank you very much, Yoshita. See, the very fact that we are having a signature event on counter-terrorism, I think it's a very clear indication of the fact that we want to keep the spotlight on terrorism. And this is on all aspects of terrorism. You know, it is not just about cross-border terrorism, but it also, the terrorists are now using very sophisticated, thing to attack. And this is causing a great deal of concern. So we want to, and for example, financing of terrorism. Once again, they are using financing channels. And in fact, if you recall, during the high-level week on counter-terrorism, India and France got together to do a side event which was focused on this particular aspect of counterterrorism, which is financing of terrorism. So I think our intention is to keep the spotlight on counterterrorism and not to lose sight of the fact that, in fact, you may have been following many of the statements which I have been making in the Security Council, and I have always kept the spotlight on terrorism in the major areas of the world. And ISIL has its reach all over the world, and I have kept the spotlight. And for example, one of the things which is concerning, which is of concern to all Security Council members is the increase in terrorism in Africa. And then I've said very clearly that you only ignore it at your own peril. That's what I've been saying. So I think the whole intention is keep the spotlight. Yes, there are linkages with terrorists. And as you correctly said, there are proscribed terrorists who have linkages. And as long as these linkages exist, I think it is important for the Secretary General's report to be a comprehensive one, which covers these linkages. So this is, of course, the way we look at it. So that's my answer to your question.
Thank you. Yes, please, ma'am.
Thank you. When I believe it was several years ago, the Prime Minister Imran Khan said that he had spoken with President Modi and had said to him that both our countries have the same problem, and the problem is poverty. And I would like to ask you to comment upon that and upon the part that the growing inequality, both within nations and globally, economic inequality, is contributing to the growth and spread of terrorism.
No, thank you very much for your question. I just wanted to say very clearly that India desires normal neighborly relations with Pakistan. And our consistent position on the issues is that if there are issues between India and Pakistan, it should be resolved bilaterally and peacefully. And as I just mentioned, we have the Simla Agreement, and which provides for a bilateral discussion and resolution of issues. And this should be resolved in an atmosphere which is free of terror, hostility, and violence. And therefore, right now, the onus is on Pakistan to create such a conducive atmosphere, including by taking credible and verifiable action not to allow any territory under their control to be used for cross-border terrorism against India. And Pakistan must prove its consistency between its words and its actions. So this is our stand on what you just mentioned. And I also wanted to mention that when it comes to the question of dealing with inequities, and various other aspects, India has been one of the focus of Indian diplomacy, and one of the priority areas is development partnership. We have pledged more than $30 billion as lines of credit. We have had thousands and thousands of training and capacity building slots, and we have done it all over the world, particularly in places in Africa, for example. And this is precisely to make sure that we are able to contribute in a very constructive way to countries, small states, landlocked countries, and see how we can contribute to the prosperity and the welfare of these countries. So therefore, I think you also know about the India UN Development Fund, which we have here, and where we have pledged the fund is basically for small countries, small island states and others, where we are and when the vaccine hit, for example, we repurposed the funds to tackle vaccines, and vaccine equity is yet another important aspects which we are looking at. So your question goes much beyond just a question of tackling terrorism. It's a question of tackling the inequality and inequities between countries, and I think India is at the forefront of this. And on Sustainable Development Agenda 2030, we are very You know very well that in Rio +20, for example, that was a time when this was discussed. India was one of the countries which said it should come to the UN and it should be negotiated in the UN between countries. And thanks to our efforts and thanks to efforts of like-minded countries, it finally came to the UN to negotiate the SDGs. And now it is owned by all of us. And India, I can assure you, will be a huge contributor to ensure that to whatever extent we can, that these inequalities, inequities between countries can be addressed in a very purposeful manner.
Thank you, sir. I'll give the floor to Susan, followed by the gentleman in the black.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Susan Tehrani from WION News, India. Mr. Ambassador, one of the issues that you'll be tackling, as you mentioned, is maritime security, and you pointed to a number of issues that you'll be dealing with. I was wondering, how confident are you that notably the permanent members of the United Nations Security Council might be, all of them might be on the same page as you when it comes to maritime security, and whether or not there might be some challenges in that regard if, as was asked earlier, a document might come out ultimately? Thank you.
So I think I'll put it this way, that, see, maritime security as a concept, as a holistic concept, is being discussed for the first time in the Security Council. And this is something which I have received support from every member of the Security Council. And we genuinely felt that given our own ethos, our own background, that this deserves the attention of the Security Council. As I said, there have been parts of, like piracy, for example, that is something where there have been resolutions on piracy. But there are other issues which I just mentioned, which deserve a holistic consideration. Now, I'm very happy to say that I think we are looking forward to a very robust and participation in the meeting. As I said, His Excellency, the President of the Democratic Republic of Congo himself has decided to participate because they are giving a lot of importance to the theme. So I can assure you that the importance which the members of the Council give to this theme is there, very much there. And I'm really hoping that this, I think this engagement, which we hope to start, will be an engagement which will be constructive. I mean, it is not aimed at anyone. I just wanted to reassure you of that. It is not meant to aim at one member or the other. We may have different views on what is maritime security means for us, but I don't think anyone says that it is not important. So I'm very happy that we are able to host this singularly important event in the Security Council.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, please.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, Frankie Ciardo from TRT World News. Thank you, Ambassador, for having this press conference. We appreciate it, and we hope you'll have many more of these during the next month. Getting back to one of the issues you talked about with Afghanistan, do you believe that the U.S. withdrawal was a good idea, timely, and that it may be imperiling stability of your region, and particularly the borders of your country?
I don't think I would like to comment on a decision which is a sovereign decision of a country. Mm-hmm. So I'll let this question pass. Mm-hmm. It is the prerogative of the United States to decide what they want to do, and they have taken a decision. And I think it is important for us as a Security Council to ensure that we jointly support Afghanistan in bringing a democratic and a stable society which will respect women and minorities.
What is the incentive for the Taliban?
Sorry?
What is the incentive for the Taliban to negotiate a peace if they're steamrolling into
No, I think as I said, there is a requirement for a certain legitimacy for the people who come to power. And I think that is important for not just every member of the Security Council, but for all the neighbors, for the regional countries, and for all the others. And this legitimacy, you cannot get this through unilateral actions. And I think whomever you discuss with, or any country you discuss with, I think that's extremely important for them. And that, I think, is an important incentive.
Thank you.
I'll give the floor to Michelle.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. Michelle Nichols from Reuters. Good luck with the month.
Thank you.
I just wanted to follow up on your comment on Afghanistan to Edie. You said, I don't think we've quite come to the idea of a peacekeeping force in Afghanistan. Do most council members seem to share that opinion? Has anyone raised the sort of prospect of a possible peacekeeping force down the line? And then just on UNGA, can we expect to see Prime Minister Modi here in New York for the UN General Assembly?
Frankly, I don't think it has been formally, the question of peacekeeping, I don't think it has been formally raised. But right now, in fact, if I'm right, since I've been discussing with the Secretary General and the Under Secretary Generals dealing with this, their main concern is the safety and security of the UN mission there. And I think, and especially after the attack which took place in Herat, I think their focus has been on the safety of these missions. I think that is where I think the focus is on right now. And as far as my Prime Minister coming here, he was here in 2019, but we still don't know how the contours of the participation will shape up, to be very frank, because we are still looking at, the Delta variant and others which are coming in. I have had discussions before, of course, taking over the presidency. I had discussions with the Secretariat, and they have assured me that so far the precautions which we are taking inside the Security Council is adequate. But once again, there is always the question mark on how it will shape up. So I think we will have to see how it goes.
And sorry, just a very quick follow-up. Is that just from talking to your other colleagues at the UN, other ambassadors? Are most people sort of in that situation? Do you think they'd love to be here in person, but the Delta variant has kind of thrown a spanner in the works?
No, I think I can only tell you my personal opinion on this. See, it's like this, that we have countries which are hopefully coming out one way or the other, and they are hoping that it'll get better. And there are countries which are getting better. So they may be in a position to travel. But there are vast number of countries who have not yet on the vaccine curve. And I think it's important that we respect the fact that they will not be able to travel physically. So I think the question is to take all the countries along and see how can we be fair to all the countries, and especially those countries where the leaders cannot travel. And I think that is the one which is probably being discussed among the ambassadors and PRs. And we are hoping that we'll get a sort of a landing spot on that, which is fair to all the countries.
Thank you, Ambassador. Kristen Salumi from Al Jazeera English. Just wanted to ask, I don't see any Myanmar on the agenda this month. Was there any thought of bringing that up given the briefing that the UK arranged last week that COVID is spreading exponentially there and the security situation is not getting any better, the UN, the Security Council backed the ASEAN plan, but there's been no progress on that. Any desire to take that up in the Council? Was that discussed?
The members of the Security Council, as you know, they have been following the situation very closely. And we have had consultations and we have had private meetings. And in fact, the Council has made pronouncements on Myanmar. And they have also expressed their strong support for the ASEAN initiative and the ASEAN process and the 5-point consensus. So I think as far as the Security Council is concerned, they are following it very closely. And right now, I think we are also having the ASEAN foreign ministers meeting very soon. So, and we were told that during that meeting, they will be looking at the ASEAN envoy and various other issues will be discussed. So I think we will have to give the ASEAN initiative a fair chance. And I think the Council members understand that because we have collectively supported the ASEAN position. So I think it's important for us to give that space for ASEAN to go ahead and take their initiative forward. And we do hope, of course, as India, we hope that this initiative will be expedited. And, that's something we will be looking forward to. But as of now, I think they are not yet looking at any meeting on Myanmar as such. And I'm sure that they will take stock maybe in a week or 2 weeks to see where we go from there.
Thank you. So, on Myanmar, thank you for what you just said. I was going to ask the same thing. But could you give us a brief summary of India's policy with your neighbor, and including the criticism you've been getting regarding the rejection of asylum seekers?
No, thank you. Thank you for asking. It helps to clarify our position on Myanmar. Myanmar is an extremely important neighbor for us. We have a nearly 1,700 kilometers of land boundary with Myanmar. And we also share a maritime boundary border with Myanmar. We have civilizational links, historical links, political, economic, and a range of links. So what happens in Myanmar is extremely important for us, and we have a direct stake in the situation in Myanmar. And as I've articulated in many of my statements earlier, our position on Myanmar has been fairly clear. It has been consistent. We are deeply concerned about the developments in Myanmar. We have condemned the use of violence in Myanmar. We have urged maximum restraint. We believe that there can be no falling back on the path to democracy in Myanmar, and we called for upholding the rule of law and taking forward the democratic process, and in which we have actually invested in. And we have called for the release of detained leaders. We repeatedly called for engagement from their side without preconditions, and for peaceful and an urgent resolution. And so therefore, in the context in which I've just mentioned, we have, like all the others, we have extended our support to the efforts of the ASEAN. And we really hope that the ASEAN can move, as I said, expeditiously on their efforts, and also on the 5-point consensus. So we need a constructive and also a coordinated approach. And what we do not want is an action on the part of the international community which will further destabilize the country, because any instability in the country will directly affect India. So this is broadly which is our position. And as far as what you've mentioned is concerned, it is completely incorrect. Frankly, I'm happy you gave me an opportunity to clarify. It's completely incorrect that we are rejecting people. We have several thousands of them in India. And I think it's important to understand that we have 4 states of India which are neighboring Myanmar. And some of them, the ethnicity are the same. For example, we have ethnicity in a state called Mizoram is exactly the same as the ethnicity on the other side of Myanmar, in the Chins, for example. So I think what you've mentioned is incorrect, and I just wanted to mention this to you.
You don't reject asylum
No, not at all.
seekers?
Not at all.
Arun Lewis from INS. This is regarding the peacekeeping portion of your statements. What kind of event are you planning for the peacekeepers? And number 2, what do you think can be done regarding the problem of impunity that people who attack peacekeepers face? And what do you think the council can do in that regard? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. See, on the 18th of August, we hope to have the day in a way dedicated to peacekeeping. We hope to start around 9:15 or so in the morning. We would like to start it with a solemn occasion on in the Peacekeepers Memorial, where we hope to have the External Affairs Minister of India and also His Excellency the Secretary General. External Affairs Minister, we hope to lay a wreath, and both of them to say a few words. And after that, when we come to the council, we are also looking at and discussing with others the possibility of something which is much stronger to look at the framework through which we can address impunity against peacekeepers. So we are looking at and discussing whether we can have a resolution, for example, on this issue, because from whatever I have been discussing with the Secretariat, I was told that, for example, they have statistics from, I believe, 2013 onwards, and the conviction rate is alarmingly low in this, of people who have, committed crimes against peacekeepers. And we thought that it is important for us to address this. See, it is a matter of irony that peacekeepers are mainly in conflict situations and in fragile states. And it is difficult for us to expect the same, state to also have strong legal framework to convict the people who commit crimes. So it is important for us to look at it in a manner in which we are reaching out to these countries and give them the necessary wherewithal, the necessary framework, as well as the necessary, the funds and the capacity building to address this. So this is the context in which we are coming. We are discussing with others. And let me tell you that it has received a lot of support from countries, because for us, protecting the protectors, as I said, is a very important aspect of what we are looking at. And we are also, after this, going to look at the technology and peacekeeping. We feel that technology is extremely important, because the people whom they are combating are people who come with superior technology. So we need to give them that technology. And we are hoping that we'll work with the UN and not only strengthen through the discussions and through a possible outcome, but we'll also see how we can do it in a very practical way.
As a follow-up, do you think that the International Criminal Court could take up the issues of attacks on peacekeepers?
Now, we would prefer that these are issues which should be tackled in the national framework, in the national legislation framework. I think that's the best way of going about it.
Hi, thanks. I just wanted to go back to the UN High-Level Week in September. So I thought pretty much it had been decided it would be a hybrid format, so countries that actually can't make it can send videos or project their videos, and then there will be obviously opportunity for world leaders who have been vaccinated or have the access to get to the U.S. So is there continuing discussion then on the nature of the high-level week, or is it pretty much firmed up? Thanks.
No, you're right. What I really meant was that even if it's a high-level week, the question is that every country have to take a decision whether they should be coming, not coming. So there are various factors which go into it. And a question is travel. There are countries which have to take 2 connecting flights, 3 connecting flights. So a lot of other issues come in. While yes, there is a hybrid model, but I think those are the other factors which will be taken on board before each individual country take decision on whether the head of state or who else should come.
Can I just ask, are countries waiting to see if President Biden is coming? Is that part of the decisions?
No, I mean, I think, you're asking a question which should ideally be asked to the heads of states.
I think I have run over all the list that I had. Unless anyone else wants to take the floor and ask a question, I will now move on to the virtual participants. Thank you. If there are none, I have only one request for question from Mr. Iftikhar. Please go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Ambassador. The questions about India, Pakistan, and Kashmir have been asked, but may I address your comments with regard to the constitutional changes that you said were brought about by parliamentary procedures? Sir, the UN Security Council resolutions prohibit any change of status in the disputed territory, and the Secretary General has also said so in his August 8, 2019 statement. Any comments, sir?
No, as I mentioned to you, These are constitutional changes, and these changes are within our constitution, and these changes are entirely the prerogative of the Parliament of India. So I don't think that at this point of time we are discussing anything else. I think it is absolutely legitimate on our Parliament to pass laws and rules and regulations relating to Jammu and Kashmir.
But still, I refer to you the Secretary General's statement, who said any change in the status of Jammu and Kashmir is a violation of UN Security Council resolutions.
As I've told you, Jammu and Kashmir is an integral and inalienable part of India. If there needs to be a change in status, it is the vacation of the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Question related to the safety of peacekeepers. Can you comment upon a statement that was made by Lakhdar Brahimi when he was, I believe, this was after he was foreign minister of Algeria. He said one of the reasons for the attacks on UN peacekeepers is because the UN is perceived as a party to disputes, and it is no longer perceived as an impartial, independent organization. And this was, I believe, following the first Resolution 678, which led to, according to Ramsey Clark, the destruction of the infrastructure necessary to support human life in Iraq. And I think it was at that point, and following the collapse of the Soviet Union, that the UN was seen very much as being used. So could you comment upon what he said and to what extent that's still the case?
See, I don't want to comment on what he has mentioned. It is his opinion, his view. But let me just underline the fact that, for example, when you take Indian peacekeepers, we have observed the highest standards of professionalism when we do peacekeeping. And we are very proud of it. And when we do the peacekeeping, we are bound by the mandate. And we strictly adhere to the mandate. There is no question of us taking sides. Certainly not political sides. We are there to keep peace. We have a mandate to implement. And one can always say that maybe the mandate, there is a push by some countries to make the mandates more robust. And they want to probably take on terrorism more headlong through the peacekeeping forces. And there are countries which feel that maybe the mandate should be what it is now. And then once we have a very robust mandate, then you're actually putting them right in the line of fire and endangering them. And there is also the other opinion which says that the national security forces should take the lead in many of this. For example, in fighting terrorism. And it is not really up to the peacekeepers to do that. So I think there are various views on the question of mandate and how far it should extend. But when it comes to taking sides, I think there are many, many professional, peacekeepers, and their sole role is to implement the mandate, protect the civilians where they have been tasked to. For example, if you recall, we had the volcanic eruption in Goma. And it was Indian peacekeepers, in fact, who immediately went, helped the civilians to get out of the way. They were right there, even though the lava was flowing and it was coming closer, and they helped them. And that is what professionalism is about. And, and we are also championing the cause on the fighting and combating sexual violence, for example. These are all areas where we have championed. And India, as you know, we provided the first contingent of women peacekeepers. And they actually went to Liberia. So therefore, we are looking at this in a way in which we can implement the mandate to the best of our ability. But I don't think a professional peacekeeping force takes sides. I don't think they are political. And I'm not very convinced that somehow the peacekeepers are being used, so to say, by the United Nations.
We have one more request for the floor from David Weiner of Bloomberg. Please. Go ahead.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thanks so much for having this press conference. I'd like to hear from you publicly if you can say something about the weigh in from India's perspective on the state of the Iran's nuclear talks. Clearly, we've been hearing from U.S. officials and European officials that it's looking increasingly hard to strike a deal given the elections in Iran. How is this going to be addressed at the UN, and what is your view on it?
No, I think your question pertains to, I suppose, the JCPOA, and of course India has fully and supported the full and effective implementation of the JCPOA and the UN Security Council Resolution 2231, and we have always maintained that all the JCPOA related issues should be resolved peacefully through dialogue and diplomacy. And we have extended our support to all such efforts which help in constructively addressing and resolving the outstanding issues. And we are convinced that all parties should adhere to their respective obligations under the Resolution 2231. And so therefore, as far as we are concerned, we can only hope that the ongoing engagement which is going on can result in a positive outcome. And that is what we are looking for. At this point of time, that the parties are discussing themselves. So I don't have any comments on that per se, but we do hope that the ongoing engagement results in a positive outcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, please, you want to take
Thank you again, Mr. Ambassador. Many journalists have been targeted. Journalists are paying their blood and their freedom around the world. And there was some calls for the Secretary General to appoint a special envoy on the freedom of the press and the protection of journalists. What are your views, sir, on this issue? Thank you.
No, I must confess that I've seen some of these statements, and I have not yet discussed it with the Secretariat and what they exactly have in mind. And let me assure you very clearly that we have always stood by journalists, we have always stood by civil society and NGOs, and since we have discussed Afghanistan, particularly in the case of Afghanistan, it has been a matter of deep concern that there has been a targeted attack on journalists and NGOs. But as you correctly said, this is not just in Afghanistan, it is happening elsewhere, and it's a matter of serious concern. So there is no question that this should be addressed in a very purposeful manner. But on the very specific question which you have, I've heard about this, and of course, but I have not discussed it in that great detail of what he exactly plans to do.
Sorry, Ambassador, very quick follow-up. Just on Afghanistan and the attack last week on the UN, will we see a statement from the Security Council on that?
I think as you know, we have what is called the pen holder system. And this is a system which I learned after coming here. But the pen holders have evidently, attempted a draft, and they are discussing with other countries. And I'm hoping that, something of this nature. I do sincerely hope that the Security Council can talk about this, can pronounce on this. I think it's extremely important at this juncture to pronounce terrorist attacks and other attacks are not acceptable. And I really wish the pen holders can persuade all the countries to come on the same page and issue a statement.
Thank you, sir. And I think we have exhausted our list for now. Thank you, everyone, again, for joining us today. And thank you for your support and your continued engagement. And we will keep in touch with you as the month progresses. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much.